We're back. Time for another edition of the Carolina Insider. Jones and Adam here with you. And excited to be back talking a little Tar Heel football. Carolina, just its second ever. I said first ever on the postgame on Saturday. Hand up. I was wrong. Second ever multiple overtime victory. The other was the Adam 2010 Music City Bowl against Tennessee. Tar Heels win against Appalachian State in overtime, double overtime, 40-34. First overtime win in total for the Tar Heels since 2015. They lost 6 straight overtime games. 2015, at the end of the regular season, beating Frank Beamer and Virginia Tech in his last home game. That was the last time Carolina had won an overtime game. Until now, Adam, Tar Heels win in double overtime against Appalachian State. We will talk about that. Of course, we're going to break it all down. Really fun guest today. You're probably not going to know his name. Kevin Best. Kevin, who works in communications for the university, but had spent 20 years as the SID for Tar Heel football. So we talked to Kevin some about his current role, which, of course, does include the communication and dissemination of information after the incident, the tragic incident on campus a couple weeks ago. So we're going to talk to Kevin about all that and about his time with football. And he worked for the ACC for 6 years. So we talk about that, too. Some great stories from Kevin. I have Adam. Now, none of them, I'm not going to say any of them get my blood pressure super high. But not one, not two. It's a 3-pack of a how can you justify that.
Does CR legal team have enough attorneys on staff to support all of this?
Got them all on retainer for just this purpose. One, I'll just give you a little spoiler. One of them's going to Adam and me.
Oh.
One of them's going to Minnesota. One of them's going to people who complain about something in particular that I will talk about. So triple, how can you justify that?
That seems like a diverse group, but I never like it when I'm in the mix.
Yeah. Trying to say that you and Minnesota don't have a lot in common, Adam? Maybe you do. We'll all find out together. Adam has a list and Olympic sport recap, of course. And more. Adam, what's up?
Dubs all over the place for the Tar Heels this weekend, especially.
Or ties.
Those are like dubs. When they're road draws, I score that as a dub.
Yeah.
And I know that you keep the records differently anyway.
That's right.
So we'll find out where you have all these teams later on in the show. But as everyone saw, the biggest dub in terms of attendance was the Tar Heel football team at Kenan Stadium.
Yep. We're going to talk about that after I remind you that we're brought to you in part by the Pinehurst Resort, home of the 2024 U.S. Open. Pinehurst Resort is more than Donald Ross's masterpiece. Pinehurst number 2. Gil Hance's stunning redesign of number 4. There's the Cradle. There's the Pinehurst Brewing Company. It's all down the hill from the fully renovated Manor Inn. Never been a better time at the cradle of American golf than right now. Go to Pinehurst.com to plan your visit. 40-34 double overtime. Tar Heels beat Appalachian State on Saturday in Kenan Stadium. Adam, a lot to talk about on this one. First and foremost, I thought Appalachian played as well as it can play. I said we talked on Friday. Carolina was, don't bet on it. The Tar Heels were a heavy favorite in this game. I thought Carolina was a better team than Appalachian, and I still think that. But what I also think is that Appalachian found its way to a really good quarterback. I think Joey Aguilar, the junior college transfer who was not their starter but became their starter when the initial starter, Ryan Berger, was hurt in the first game. I think, and I haven't seen Ryan Berger play, but I have seen Joey Aguilar, and I think he's a good player. kind of reminded me, Adam, not in necessarily in any way other than how it came about, of Darian Durant. Like, remember Darian Durant, the story on Darian was always, not a great practice player, blah, 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 blah. But then he'd get in the game and he was great. And this dude just seemed like a gamer. I mean, he gave App a chance to win. And there's some reasons why, and we're going to talk about all that. But I thought they found a good quarterback. I'm not sure App can play any better than it did. That's not a big surprise. They were going to be excited to be in Chapel Hill. They had played Gardner-Webb the week before. App is known for playing Power 5 teams close. I think Sean Clark knew that this was an important game for him and for his program, and Carolina was going to get the best shot. And then App, to its credit, played very well, set the tone early, stopping Carolina on the 4th and inches after the Tar Heels had a really nice opening drive, gotten deep into Appalachian territory. And then it was it was back and forth all night. Neither team ever led by more than 7. Give credit to both sides. They both made big plays. They would absorb big moments from the other team and respond. It was a really well-played, physical football game where I thought both teams did good things out there on the field. And I know a lot of the talk has been, Appalachian, they're so frisky. But, Adam, this is a game Carolina could have easily lost. Appalachian played well enough to win the game. And the Tar Heels, Mac Brown has said, made, according to the coaches, twice as many mistakes as they did in the South Carolina game. And yet they won the game. And I'm not sure that would have always been the case over these last several years. But it was the case on Saturday. And I know there's things that people aren't happy with. But 2 things. One, I think Carolina actually played pretty well, which we'll talk about. And 2, they won the game. Most importantly, the Tar Heels won the game. They're 2-0.
And Mac Brown said a heavy portion of those mistakes were mental mistakes, which he attributed in some part to the focus, which I thought he had a good start. That this was, I think he said, the 8th straight time that App has played a Power 5 team, and the outcome has been 7 points one way or the other.
That's correct.
So I think that sort of lends itself to the idea, like, App isn't going undefeated against all the other teams. There's something about the way they prepare to play these types of games and the way that teams like Carolina prepare to play App. That whether you like it or not, you can't prepare the same way every week. It's just not humanly possible.
Right.
And I think that plays out sometimes in games like this. Now, that doesn't mean that App didn't play well, because they did. And it doesn't really mean that Carolina didn't play well, because I think they did many things pretty well. But I just think that is often what you're going to get in a matchup like this, which I think is why Mac Brown made the comment he did after the game about how these games are great for the state of North Carolina and State and ECU should go play them.
Which, by the way, ECU and App are, and Mac Brown clarified those statements. He wasn't saying, like, how come other people aren't playing App? ECU and State are both going to play App. ECU and App are playing this week, in fact. And State has a contract, I think it's the same thing. I think it's a 2-for-1 coming up in future years. He was just saying it's time for someone else to play them, ha, 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 ha.
The fact that anyone would get mad
about that.
Yeah,
they got mad about it, yeah.
Is, what must your life be like?
Adam, the dominant focus for Carolina, or the dominant force in this game for Carolina, was Omarion Hampton and the Carolina rushing attack. I mean, 319 yards for the Tar Heels in this game, and that was without British Brooks. Brooks, after we had talked to him last week and had him on Friday, gets banged up, unable to go.
Was it a hand injury after he shook my hand and my power was simply too much?
After you said British. So British Brooks unable to go. And Adam, the talk has long been that Omarion Hampton, the combination that Omarion Hampton has of speed, power, size is rare. And we've seen him have some moments, but he had his breakout moment in this one. He was a dominant force, 26 carries, most in a game for a Tar Heel since Gio Bernard had 25-plus against Maryland in 2012. 234 yards for Hampton, 3 touchdowns, most yards by any Tar Heel on the ground since Michael Carter had 308 in 2020 against Miami. A crazy game where Javonte Williams was also over 200. Remember that night. The most touchdowns that the Tar Heels had in a game since Ty Chandler had 4, against Wake Forest in 2021. So, Adam, it was Hampton's game, which is good. I want to go ahead and give my first. How can you justify that here? I'm gonna try to hold off. Drake May threw for 208 yards and didn't have a touchdown. Okay, I just have to do it. Here, it's the first.
Just get it all out.
Yeah, it's the first of the 3. How can you justify that? Brought to you by CR Legal Team. They stand up for you, proud partner of Carolina Athletics. Adam, the fact that anyone's first thought after this game was, how come Chip Lindsey didn't let Drake May throw the ball enough? He's costing Drake the Heisman. Adam, let me ask you a question, Adam. Chip Lindsey's the offensive coordinator for the Tar Heels. What's Chip Lindsey's number one job as the offensive coordinator for the Tar Heels?
I think it's to enable the Tar Heels to win the football games.
For his to enable the Tar Heel offense to do as much as they can to help the Tar Heels win the game.
Score as many points as possible.
Adam Drake May is the starting quarterback for the Tar Heels. What is Drake May's job as the starting quarterback?
I think he works in tandem with Chip Lindsey, the way that I understand it, and the other 10 offensive Tar Heels to score as many points as possible for North Carolina.
Adam, the fact that anyone thinks the number one offensive goal should be have Drake May hit some kind of statistical number is asinine. Like, look, there's going to be times that Drake May is going to have to throw for a bunch of yards, or that Drake May is going to need to throw for 5 touchdowns. We've seen him do it before. We know he's awesome. But Adam, when you've got a dude who rushes for 234 yards, he averaged 9 yards a carry, and your team rushes for 319 yards. Do you think Drake May is sitting there going, guys, I know the plays to give it to Amari Hampton, who's averaging 9 yards per carry, but I really am going to want College Game Day to talk more about my stats, so we're not going to do that. Do you really think Chip Lindsey's up there going, look, I know Amari Hampton is ripping through guys on every single handoff and is just dominating this game, but we got to get Drake his? Neither one of them are that way. There might be some players that are that way. I guarantee Drake May is not. Drake May cares about one thing, and that's winning the game. And side note, Adam, he played really well. Drake May played very, very well. He was accurate. He ran the ball well. He hit a couple deep shots. I know the Tar Heels want to stretch the field more than they were in this game, but guess what? Appalachian played with 2 deep safeties for a large majority of the game because they were concerned that Drake May was going to beat him over the top. Adam, I'm no football expert, but when you have 2 safeties playing high and deep, Adam, that's what they call a lighter box. You got a lighter box up there. And that's why Amari Hampton can run for 234 yards, in addition to the fact that he's a terrific player who's just going to go out there and be a stud. The fact that anyone's thought process after this game was somehow that the Tar Heels would have been better off with Drake May throwing more. And again, that's nothing against Drake May. It's how this game played out. The problem in this game was not that Drake May didn't throw enough. That's ridiculous. Carolina won the game. The Tar Heels scored, I think, at one point on 5 consecutive offensive drives. Were there a couple play calls early in the game that the Tar Heels would like to have back? Yes. And really more, honestly, it was more about the execution of those play calls than the play calls themselves. But Adam, Drake May is a terrific player. Drake May wants to do one thing. and that's win the football game. If that means he throws for 5 yards or 500 yards, he's going to be happy with that, and he and the Tar Heels were happy on Saturday night.
Just making sure I'm remembering right. You said none of these.
That one got me a little fired up.
Well, a couple things about this. Number one, you can't win the Heisman if your team doesn't win. And Drake May's team won, so he's still in the discussion. There will be a time this year he will throw for 450 yards because you have to use what's working. And I think if – go ahead.
I was just thinking about how everyone complained in the past that the Tar Heels weren't running the ball well enough. Like, we mentioned that Miami game in 2020. Bro, that's the unicorn. That game happens once every 150 years. That you can get 780 yards of offense or whatever it was and have 500 rushing and 300 passing or whatever it was that day. That doesn't happen. That doesn't happen. So the fact that somehow the thought process of some people was that, man, I'm glad the Tar Heels won, but I wish Drake would have thrown for more yards. I mean, it is mind-numbing to me. Mind-numbing.
That's part of why it must be so delightful to be an offensive coordinator, because your job description is pretty simple. Score a lot of points. Like, I feel like Chip Lindsey probably thinks if the Tar Heels average 40 or more, he's doing a pretty good job. But then what you actually find out is you have to do it with such style that everyone approves.
But also be tough. Also be tough and run the ball.
Impose your will while throwing it down the field, running an occasional reverse and or flea flicker, possibly on the same play. I mean, and here's the thing. Mac Brown has pointed out several times, you get fewer plays in a game this year because of the clock rules. So the plays you do get, you need to utilize the weapons that you feel really good about. And if you watched the game on Saturday, it wasn't like Omarion Hampton had like a 92-yard run and an 89-yard run and then a bunch of 2-yard runs. He was consistently getting big chunks of yards. So to me, that sounds like a pretty good offensive strategy to use your big chunks of yards guy who is doing it in this game rather than, remember, we're still not completely sure about the receivers Drake May is throwing the ball to.
Right. And look, Carolina wants to and needs to be able to stretch the field more effectively with some more explosive plays. I don't think that is in question. And that has been something the Tar Heels have done very well over the last couple of years. Now, they are also dealing with some different personnel than what they had. I mean, their top 2 receivers from a year ago were gone. The guy that they thought was going to be their top outside receiver, top receiver in period, we know what is going on with Tez Walker. Nate McCollum, another guy they thought was going to be a huge part of their offense, is just now working it. I think you'll finally see him kind of in full this upcoming weekend against Minnesota, or at least him available to be in full. And so, yes, the Tar Heels, and John Copenhaver had a big wrap around his hand, who's been a big part of their offense in the preseason. So, yes, the Tar Heels would like to be able to open things up and stretch the field even more in the pass game, because Lord knows what will happen then with the run game when you can stretch the field even more. If he's averaging 9 yards a carry when everybody thinks they aren't throwing for enough explosive plays, just imagine what's going to happen when they do. So, Adam, I was so impressed with Carolina's, and Caleb Hood came in and ran well when he was asked to come in. And, by the way, the game, what eventually became the game-winning touchdown for Drake May, no one touched him. He was able to do that cool little layup thing when he jumped into the end zone, looking like the jump man, flipping it up. You know why? Because Appalachian State sold out with all they had to stop Omarion Hampton. You know why? Because Omarion Hampton was averaging 9 yards a carry. So, does that mean it's going to be the exact same thing this week against Minnesota? No, of course it doesn't mean that. It might be. It might be something else. Each game is different. The way that you attack each game is different. And here's the great part. The Tar Heels have options. They have a guy at the quarterback spot who can go do it for you if he needs to. They have guys with an S on the end in the tailback position who can be studs for you if that's the way it has to happen. Carolina has some weapons. They're figuring it out at the wide receiver spot. They're dealing with some stuff, but they're getting there. The great part is they have options.
Isn't it better to force teams to prepare for more? I mean,
Yes.
there have been 2 ACC offensive backs of the week. Carolina's had them both, and it's been 2 different players. So now if I'm Minnesota and I'm sitting up there in my parka preparing for the Tar Heels, okay, I'm worried about Drake May, which Appalachian obviously was, and that was the primary thing they were worried about. Well, I can't really prepare that way because, look, here's this other guy, number 28. I've got film on him. I'm going to have to do something to stop this guy because this guy just ran for a boatload of yards. He rode the boat, as P.J. Fleck would say. But then what if British Brooks comes back? That guy's tough and gets big yards even after contact. That's the picture you want to present to opposing teams, to force them to spend time worrying about all of that, which Carolina has now put on film through the first couple weeks. Would they like to have even more? Yes. Will they need even more in order to be as good as they want to be? Definitely. You can't win all the games playing the way Carolina's played offensively, and especially on Saturday. You can't win all the games that way. But you can win 2 games, which is all the games Carolina's played, which is why the Tar Heels are 2-0.
Your point about fewer plays and fewer possessions is a good one, and it played a role in this game. And a lot of that is due to Appalachian, and that goes to the Tar Heel defense. Appalachian was able to continuously I felt like Carolina got 10-yarded to death in this game from Appalachian's offense. They had a couple of big plays down the field, 1 or 2, but it really wasn't as though the Tar Heels were sitting there getting gashed defensively. And I also think the Tar Heels got pretty good pressure, which is hard to say when you get 0 sacks. But it's hard to get sacks when it felt like every pass play was either on the move, which was great. I mean, almost every run for Appalachian was a zone stretch play, and then some play action worked off of that. Or it was just a real quick receiver goes to a spot, turns around, boom, you get it to him. That goes to what Mac Brown has been pretty vocal about since the game, is he feels like his guys need to play tighter in the secondary. Whether that is individuals, whether that is scheme, that's up to the coaches. But also, Mac Brown, I thought he said at his press conference on Monday and at the radio show on Monday, he talked about disguising coverages better to show different looks so that the opposition doesn't automatically know what you're doing just by looking at what you're doing pre-snap. So all those things will occur as Carolina continues to mature. Remember, they are playing 2 very young corners who, by the way, played well, particularly Marcus Allen, had 3 passes broken up in this game. Tayon Holloway didn't start this game, but still playing a lot in that secondary. And Carolina's trying to figure out what's going on at that star position right now due to the injury to DeAndre Boykins. So some of that, the fewer plays, the time of possession, is a big credit to App. Some of it's the new rule. I do think it's taken away 4 or 5 plays, which can be significant. So, Adam, I know the numbers don't look great for the Tar Heel defense, and we've seen the Tar Heel, we've talked about it. Mac Brown's talked about it. The Tar Heel defense hasn't been as good as it needs to be for Carolina to be as good as it wants to be over the last couple of years. I didn't think Carolina was just getting gashed and slashed and was fourth quarter last year versus App defense. I thought App had a good game plan. I think Carolina understands that it needs to be able to adjust better. And fortunately for the Tar Heels, they made enough plays, whether it was Cedric Gray on the pressure that forced the interception by Don Chapman, whether it was Huzzy with the terrific stop in double overtime on the 3rd down before the 4th down play, where he was one-on-one in open space and saved at least a first down and maybe a touchdown. They made enough plays to get out of this thing. I think the baseline of what they're working with is better than what we've seen the last couple of years, with the understanding that there's still room for improvement and growth.
Yeah, I don't think just because you're understandably scarred, we get it, we bear the same scars by some of the Tar Heel defensive performances of the last couple of years. You can't just, after one double overtime game, say, oh, the defense is the same as it's ever been, because last year it was weirdly close against App, and this year it's weirdly close against App, so everything's the same. It's not the same, because that doesn't take into account that in week 1, the Carolina defense was very, very good. against a quarterback who then went out and won Conference Player of the Week honors. So we don't know. We have one example of this year's defense being good enough to win you the game. And then we have one example of this year's defense being good enough not to lose you the game.
Yeah.
What are they really? We don't know yet. But I do think what's different than past years is you can look at some of the individuals and go, they have made some plays. At times Carolina has needed plays made, and that is encouraging moving forward as the coaches figure out which 11 are your best 11 to make the unit that gets the stops you need.
40-34, the final. That 1-minute drive at the end was really impressive.
Mac Brown loved that drive.
Well, I mean, I will say it, on first down, you took a sack, and it was 2nd and 16. And then from that point forward, it was surgical. I mean, Drake May showed you right there what kind of player he is. He made the throws. He made some big plays with his legs. And, Adam, I mean, you feel for Ryan Coe because the Tar Heels, I mean, in that parameter of time, situation, that's, I mean, could you have burst? Could you have hit a 70-yard touchdown? Sure. But, I mean, that is about as well as you can do it. You set up a dead straight 39-yard field goal, and it just wasn't close. And you have to assume that that was the pressure of the situation because Ryan Coe, every other kick Ryan Coe has kicked that we have seen him for the Tar Heels has not looked anything like the two kicks that happened, one when App called a timeout and then the one that counted, neither of which were close. So Mac Brown has said that kicking position is open. We know Noah Burnett had a solid year last year for the Tar Heels. We documented a couple shows ago. I mean, he had some struggles late. We all remember the kick against NC State. So that position will be up for grabs. And the Tar Heels need to find some consistency there because, I mean, that's not going to be the last pressure kick. And even having said that about Coe, I mean, he made a 47-yard kick earlier in the game. He made another field goal, made one against South Carolina, has been good on kickoffs. So he's done plenty of good things, but a tough moment for him after what I thought was a really quality execution by the Tar Heels in that what ended up being about a 90, I think it was 122, where they took over there at the end of the game.
And I think Mac Brown's been pretty clear that he feels like the kicking inconsistency has been present through training camp on into the season.
Yes.
So this isn't a new development that took him by surprise. I'm not sure he ever expected one kicker to kick in every single game this year. So he's sort of like he's managing his bullpen, trying to figure out which guy is hot at any given time and find the right kicker for the right matchup. You mentioned the failed 4th and inches early in the game. As coaches start figuring out they're getting fewer offensive plays, I wonder if that's going to affect their willingness to go for it on some of those 4th downs. Like when you get within whatever field goal range is, which at this moment we don't really know, does it behoove you more to take the points now with these clock rules if you feel like that's a guaranteed 3, which the Tar Heels don't feel that way right now? I understand that. But I'll just be interested to see if that changes the philosophy at all. And then I think the complete flip side of that is, where would Carolina be if they just never kicked over the last 6 games? Like, forget it. The Tar Heels are never kicking. They're going for it on every 4th down. I don't know. And that's to say nothing negative about the punting game because the punting game's been good.
Well, yeah, and sneaky big play. Ben Kiernan on an oddly bad snap, and I think somebody missed a block up front. I mean, when and that is one thing about the offense. Tar Heels had the ball with a chance to salt this game away, had the first down that would have prompted App to have to start calling its timeouts, and they got that holding call. And Carolina's been a lot better penalty-wise under Mac Brown, period, than it had been the several years before that. And yet, there were some big penalties in this game. You know, Kevin Hester getting a face mask, big call. There was a defensive holding. I think it maybe was Holloway. If it wasn't, I'm sorry. Maybe it wasn't. Away from a 3rd down scramble from Aguilar, who had gotten stopped short, but there was a defensive holding on the other side of the field. Gave him a first down. I mean, there were a couple of plays. There was face mask. I think a face mask in the drive that Appalachian eventually tied the game near the end of regulation that really flipped the field, moved App from around the 35 or 40-ish of their own territory all the way into Carolina territory. So there were some key penalties there that hurt, and including on this drive, which the beginning of this point was Kiernan sneakily made a huge play in getting away from the rush and getting a quality kickoff in doing so. App did eventually go down and tie the game, but a block kick there, and who knows what happened. So really big play by Kiernan, and that's where you do have, you have the benefit of having a veteran guy there who is able to make the play.
Tar Heel special teams, a work in progress. Some good, some bad. Yeah. And Mac Brown also said about the kickoff returns. Tar Heel's going to be a little more aggressive there.
Well, App was very definitively kicking away from George Pettaway, who in limited opportunities has shown that he can be pretty explosive in the kick return game. They were, whoever it was, Tar Heels had DJ Jones back there some, had Caleb Hood back there some, and they were almost automatically calling for a fair catch. On the last kickoff, Caleb Hood had so far to run to get it, he actually fell down when he caught it, and I think he would have had space to run, but he just couldn't keep his feet because he had so far to go. But on every other one, they had called for a fair catch because that had been the plan going in. They adjusted, but unfortunately it just didn't work out. But they had some opportunities for returns there that they didn't take. Mac Brown has acknowledged that, and on you go.
I think the sum of all this is it was a week 2 game in which you won, and you came away with things that you feel like you did well, and maybe you found a couple things that you didn't know you did as well. We haven't talked about the offensive line, which you never talk about unless they're giving up a million sacks.
Yeah.
They're doing a great job in the run game, and they're more or less keeping defenses off of Drake May, which we said that might be a question mark going into the year, and so far it's looked pretty good. But also the Tar Heels have found some things they need to do better, which if you had it all figured out in week 2, that would be wonderful, but I don't recall that ever happening in a Tar Heel football season.
Yeah, had to make some moves up front with Diego Pound starting at left tackle, William Barnes going over to right guard due to Jonathan Adorno and Ed Montelis not being available in this game. Both those guys and British Brooks expected to practice for the Tar Heels this week, so that's some good news. Get some guys who were a little banged up this past week, get them available for this upcoming week. Adam, anything else here from Carolina and Appalachian State? It was a great crowd. I mean, App had more road fans there than a traditional road crowd. That's to be expected. They were into it. The Tar Heels were into it. The student section was packed. It was loud. It was just a great atmosphere. Great atmosphere and a fun night.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the problem with saying, I wish the Tar Heels didn't play games like this. Well, games like that do make for really entertaining atmospheres. The kick time helped because people had all day in Chapel Hill, and then they could get to the stadium.
And they were able to avoid the worst of the weather.
Which was a major stroke of good fortune given what happened everywhere else. So it really is mystifying how I just think we have to accept there's X% of people who, when Carolina plays, are going to be unhappy.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the crowd does. It doesn't matter what the team does. It doesn't matter what the score is. Their takeaway in some way will be something didn't go right. Maybe that's true for life too, Jones.
Well, and again, Adam and I aren't suggesting that everything's perfect.
Of course not.
But I do think some of the negative thoughts after this game are way too extreme as well. Tar Heels won the game and had some really quality performances in doing so. And now they'll have a chance to play another really good team in Minnesota. We'll talk about the Golden Gophers on Friday in total, but very physical team. The way they like to play is similar to how App likes to play. And so it will be a challenge for the Tar Heels for sure, but looking forward to that. First ever meeting between the Heels and the Gophers.
First half of a home and home. Tar Heels get to go up to Minnesota. And another good game time, 3:30. Should be a really fun Saturday at Kenan Stadium.